So next up for our speakers here today, we have Roger Salmon, who's TSA's Chief Executive. Roger's got over 50 years' experience within the industry and is here to talk to us about empowering teams and getting the best out of your people. So please welcome Roger to the stage.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Empowerment, the management buzzword for the 1980s. Relevant then, relevant now, especially when we are driving to increase productivity, but with the limited financial resources at our disposal. So what is it? Well, it's giving your staff the power to make things happen for you and the business without having to rely all the time on you to make things happen. Empowerment is not so much empowering people as powering your business. It's treating your staff as mature adults, which they are, not children that need constant directing. It is recognising that almost everyone comes to work to do a good job, however humble their role, and to get satisfaction from doing so. It's remembering that when you employ someone, with every pair of hands comes a free brain. So why waste this precious resource when you're paying for it with procedures that impede the progress of your organisation? This brings to mind a colleague of mine at our Balham laundry many years ago. Now, Alan operated a bank of half a dozen tumblers for me, no automation in those days. And that's what he did, 40 hours a week, very reliable, come hell or high water, rain or shine. But talking to Alan, if he wasn't a world expert on train scheduling, destinations, routes, the technical details of locomotives, then he was certainly the national expert. Now, if this guy outside of work could achieve so much, then what could he achieve for me in work? And what he was doing was loading and unloading tumblers. Now, that didn't stop him from thinking. And so we can use the whole resource. Now, I wonder how many of your staff have got these hobbies outside of work that are demanding, require a great deal of intellectual thought and research. And what are they doing for you? Now, most members of staff are not working at the limit of their potential. In the days when I used to practice and work study, before the BSI scale, which is difficult to explain, properly supervised members of staff under non-incentive conditions would actually work for 40 effective minutes in every 60. Now, that was a good person under non-incentive, properly supervised conditions. Now, most people will not be working at the limit of their potential. Because most of them are just a pair of hands, most members of staff will relish the opportunity to be more involved in their work and have the power to make changes that can make their work more effective. Now, why should you empower your staff? Well, it increases motivation, it increases loyalty, it certainly increases performance of your team, and it leads on to reducing staff turnover because people are more satisfied and fulfilled in their work. It gives you and your senior managers more time to research and consider longer-term decisions, to plan strategy, if you like, rather than be embroiled all the time in solving the day-to-day problems. It will make your organisation lighter on its feet, more responsive, more efficient, more customer-focused, and more profitable. Okay, when should you do it? Well, because it's no quick fix, thought for the day panacea, if you're going to do it, start tomorrow. Because it will take a while. It took me 3 years at Smarts to have a system fully in place in an organisation of 400 people across 6 main sites, and the next 16 years to maintain it. as there's plenty of people out there, usually because of their egos, who will want to sabotage your effort. So it's no quick fix. You've got to be sure you want to do it. And actually, who should do it? You, the boss, the governor, the leader, because you have the most power, so you can afford to share some of it. Further down the line, in a larger organisation, you may find some resistance from your supervisors or first-line managers. Although you will have empowered them, the first-line managers, sharing some of your authority, of which you have much, they in turn may be somewhat reluctant to share with their team some of their limited authority. We have found that the case in our own organisation, and indeed studies done by the erstwhile Industrial Society. Now, this was something which you'll just have to manage through training, through communication, through support, and of course, through your own example. Now, how do you empower your teams? Well, let's look first at getting the philosophy right. You've got to get it right in your own head to be sure that you actually want to do this and that you're going to be in it for the long haul, because as I've said, you will get knockbacks. Now let's look at authority and what is power and can you delegate it? Well, authority usually means the right to decide and to command. However, that right does not necessarily mean that you have the power to make things happen. That doesn't always come along with it. So remember, to be an effective leader, you've got to have effective followers. And authority is of little use except to wield the ultimate sanctions of hire and fire without power. There is a difference between being in authority and being an authority. We'll come back to that in a moment. If authority is a right by status, position or ownership, then power actually is an ability. There is role power, but I see that a very little difference to authority. It's the power to invoke sanctions. But there are other sorts of power in an organisation as well. The power of being an expert, of being an authority, someone who others can turn to for advice and support because of that person, you, knowledge and experience and expertise that is respected. There is resource power, control over resources to supply or withhold them. Money, time, expertise, and the physical materials and kit for people to be able to do their job properly. To empower your teams, you have to be committed to train your people to the highest level of competence that they can attain so that they can become the expert authority too. You have to communicate with them regularly and genuinely. They need to know how they are doing, how their department is doing, and how the organisation is doing. You take decisions within the context of these. If you want to empower your staff, then they must know these things too. John Garnett, who headed up the Industrial Society so many years ago, was a great influence on my career, used to tell a story about Match of the Day. How many people, he asked, would be involved in football every Saturday afternoon, running up and down, kicking the ball, scoring goals, if at the end of the match nobody knew whether they'd won or lost? Now people used to laugh. I'm sorry you didn't. But he would say, well, you laugh. But how many of you do that in your organisations? How many of you expect your staff to come in and pull their tripe out for you for 40 hours a week, and at the end of the week, they don't know whether they've been successful? Now, how do we do this? Some of you might have heard me speak about this before because I am passionate about it. The first thing you do is implement a system of team briefing to tell people what's going on. So start with this. Start at the top of the organisation, the head, briefing your senior team. If it's a small business, you might be the manager or owner of a dry cleaning unit with everyone reporting directly to you. That's great. That's even more powerful. It's quite simple. Stick to what I call the 4 Ps. People. People love to know about people. Their colleagues, you, the customer. Who's doing what, who's leaving, who's joining, holidays, sickness, achieving, training. births, marriages and deaths. And the thank yous. There's nothing nicer in a brief meeting to say, hey, Gillian, thanks for what you did last week. That was cracking. You dealt with that customer brilliantly. In front of their peers, very powerful stuff. How we are doing. Are we achieving our results? And yes, I do mean, sorry, that's progress. The next P, how are we doing? Are we achieving our results? And yes, I do mean telling staff the financial results and explaining them. That's what we're in business for, aren't we? We don't come in and wash linen and dry clean clothes because we don't want to be doing anything else, do we? We're in it to make money. We all need to. We're in a capitalist society. No doing of mine, but we are. And we need to make money. So that is the key. Are we winning or losing? Are we making money? You're going to have to explain some of this to them. Staff are unused to hearing financial results of their company, some of them, many of them, and they will not know, for instance, there's a difference between profit and cash. They won't know why you might be obsessed by getting the debtor days down, so you've got to explain this to them. Are we installing new kit? Are we planning to? Have we solved this or that problem? And then there's sometimes the P word, policy. Now, this doesn't have to be heavy corporate stuff. It might be reiterating that in our shop or in our department, the holiday season's coming up and we can only afford to have one person on holiday at any one time. So how are we going to organise this? This is a policy decision. Or it might be some major corporate policy decision that you've got to brief everybody. And then we come to the main driver, points for action. Now this is the item that drives a business forward. What do we have to do next week, next month, next year in order to do things differently, to make the business better, to make more profit, to make customers happier, etc., etc. Now regularity is essential. It's most important that it's regular. It's not how often so much as regularity. Whether it be once a week or once a month, but once you've started it, briefing must be regular, otherwise staff will assume that they're only being told things they need to know when you want to tell them. The other thing is face-to-face briefings are essential. Briefing is absolutely no use by memo, notice, email, Facebook, tweet, Twitter, text, or any other modern communication phenomenon. It's no use. It's got to be face-to-face. Why? Because not everybody will understand everything, and questions must be encouraged and understanding checked. And if you have, which people frequently have these days, a non-English speaking team or team members, then you're going to have to need to arrange some translation, some reliable translation. So you make sure that your message is getting across and you're understanding the questions that are coming back. If you're in a larger organisation, once you've briefed your own team 3 or 4 times to get them used to it, then train them to brief their team. And when they have done this 3 or 4 times, so they've got used to it, then you can train the next layer down. And so eventually the entire company is briefed on the 4 Ps every month without fail. In Smarts, when we eventually got the policy in over 3 years, as I've said, we had a briefing week. And I had a briefing with the directors and senior managers on a Monday, and the objective was by Friday afternoon, every single person, regardless of their role, had received a brief from their immediate team leader, supervisor or manager. So within 5 days, everybody knew everything that we wanted them to know. Get all the briefers to keep a note of what questions have been asked and what answers were given to them. Were there any suggestions put forward? Now, team briefing is the best way to get information down the organisation, but you'll have to look at the briefers' notes from time to time when you walk the job, which I'm sure you do, to find out how your briefing's going, what was understood, what was asked, is the message getting through? And of course, you'll talk to individual people when you walk the job on the shop floor. Having read the briefer's notes, you can say, hey, how did you feel about such and such? Did you understand that? Did you ask a question? And then you can monitor the process and deal with any concerns that you may have. So gradually in that way, your staff begins to learn and to understand what is going on and what is required. This is essential because they cannot participate in any move towards their empowerment without being in the picture. They need information and they need knowledge. Now, during the months or perhaps a year that team briefing is being established as part of your company's culture, training needs can be identified and a training program embarked upon. Now, that was very adequately covered by Michael and Stuart in yesterday's session. I don't know whether the paper's available, but you can speak to Gillian if you want to see or learn more about that. Now, upward communication. If you're a laundry company and you have delivery drivers or unit shop with counter staff, do you really appreciate that these people see more of your customers than anybody else in the business? The driver and the counter staff know whether the business is delighting the customer, but do you have a system that regularly asks them what the customer says about your service? Do you have a system that asks, but more importantly, do you have a system that listens to the answers and then acts upon the information? Now, be prepared for healthy dissent and criticism. This might be difficult for you. You may want to go on the defensive, but it's the start of your team feeling comfortable about the changing culture or climate that you're trying to create. They are beginning to feel confident enough to speak up about a problem that they know about that you do not. From these discussions or meetings can come suggestions for change and improvement. Now, one way to get empowerment in action is to start with small projects, ideally across functional teams, a couple of people from different departments that they have to interact with occasionally, say production and distribution. If it's a unit shop, then maybe the whole team can be involved. The objective is continuous improvement in what we already do. Appoint a team leader and allow them to set their own tasks, so long as it fits in with your strategic objectives. As far as is practicable, allow the resources to be available. Time, money. Don't be stingy or cheese-paring, as nothing will come from nothing. If you're involved with a large organisation, then several continuous improvement teams can be set up across all business functions. Now, there is not time today to cover the assessment of training needs, but as I said, Mike and Stuart did that yesterday. But work on these continuous improvement teams will help to identify what is needed in terms of training and development. It's important to point out that these days training is expensive, and although some training is essential, don't waste money on unnecessary training just for the sake of it. In some instances, it may raise expectations which cannot be fulfilled. Consult widely, use your experience and judgment, and target your training rather than taking a scattergun approach. The aim of training as an integral part of your empowerment culture is to release the potential within your person, your team or teams. Now, in conclusion, many organisations will tell you that their staffs are the most important, the most valued resource, but they don't always behave like it. You may pay for higher wages, incentives, gym membership, provide canteens, and all of these things are what management gurus call hygiene factors. These are all very nice, but they're not motivators in the way that you need for your organisation. These hygiene factors will not motivate your staff to behave in the best interests of your company. They will motivate them to work in their own best interests. Involving your staff, respecting them, trusting them with valuable information about your business, setting the objectives after you have explained why, and giving them the power to achieve them is a motivator that no money can buy you. You will win both their hearts and their minds because your money and your fringe benefits will not do it. Thank you very much.